We're good to go. And we are live, not just on radio, but on YouTube as well. Everywhere that you can find us, we are Smooth 98.1. We're so sorry for the delay, but we are here now. Thank you for listening, waiting, and tuning in. Thank you for listening to Smooth 98.1. Right now, you're listening to Soul Food on a Saturday morning because that's when you listen to Soul Food here. We talk about your health and your wellness, every aspect of it. Because according to the World Health Organization, health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease and infirmity. So yes, when we say we talk about your health, every aspect of it. Now, this morning, we are continuing that conversation we started in the 7 o'clock hour about mental health, especially against the backdrop of the World Mental Health Day. And this year, the theme is mental health is a universal human right. What exactly that means, you will get to know in a matter of minutes. And my guest is almost no guest at all because he's now like our in-house psychologist. He was here yesterday talking about something on Lagos stocks, and now he's here this morning. I think we should give him an award for always being there for us. I'm referring to a clinical psychologist and, of course, the founder of PsychAid. That is Chris Abojei. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. We'll be sure to send you a word your way. All right, now getting right into it because of time. I said a number of studies before you came on. I reeled out a number of studies that were not so palatable at all. Part of it is that Nigeria, that's according to the World Health Organization's released report in 2017, that Nigeria has Africa's highest caseload of depression and then ranks 15th in the world in the frequency of suicide. And it said that 1 in 4 Nigerians, about 50 million people, were suffering from some sort of mental illness. And then if you go by the attention that is given to healthcare in comparison to other things, it pales. Now, from your practice, in your years of practice, from what you're saying, projections, where would you say Nigeria is in terms of mental health, generally, awareness, and the disposition of people to it, aside from that study, that is?
So I would say that I totally agree with the study. We're not there yet, at least when compared to other countries, mostly the Western countries. However, I would say that since 2020, we have made progress, some progress. Mental health awareness has increased significantly in Nigeria. People are becoming more aware of the importance of mental health. Of course, there's still a little bit of bias or some bias in terms of people's understanding of mental health. So most times, many people in Nigeria still think that mental health is synonymous to mental illness. And that's not true. Mental health, on the other hand, is, your state of well-being where you are able to be the best that you can be. So it's supposed to be a positive thing. Everyone should have mental health. Everyone has mental health to different degrees. So it's a mental illness that is the abnormal part of it that, but the truth is most people still don't understand that. So most times when you talk about mental health, they want to shy away from it because they think, I don't want to have an illness. I don't want to, I don't want to go to Yaba left. I don't want to do all that, but that's not it. And so we've not gotten there yet. The stigma is still there. The lack of information is still there. And I think generally Nigerians have a poor health-seeking behavior, not just with mental health, but also with physical health. So I might understand that many Nigerians think money solves all the problems. So they'll say, give me money, I'm a mental health to be fine. But you and I know that that's not true. So we're not there yet. We're not there yet. But the statistics, is still very accurate.
Yeah. Well, still according to that statistics, it says that 10% of mentally ill Nigerians have access to the care they need. So the remaining 90% do not get access to the kind of healthcare that they need. And the worst part is, I don't know, had 150 psychiatrists. I want to believe it has increased a little bit, even if it's just by 10 or 20.
100 and what?
50.
They did drop. Okay. At some point, it was actually 250 psychiatrists. So I'm assuming some people have jackpot and left that WhatsApp group. But again, yes, the psychiatrist thing seems to be reducing, but I think that for psychologists, there's been an increase. Not there yet, but there's been an increase. Looking at the database of clinical psychologists in Nigeria, I think the last time I checked, it was about 400 licensed clinical psychologists in Nigeria from 150 a few years ago. So there's been an increase, but there's also a risk that a lot of those psychologists are also planning to leave, So I think we should actually be declaring a state of emergency in healthcare in Nigeria, because not just with psychiatrists, almost every healthcare professional is thinking of leaving the country, and that's a problem. We don't have enough people, and yet the people we have are planning to leave.
I don't even want to say what is on my mind as regards that. It is gloomy. Now that a number of healthcare professionals are looking to leave, which is no news at all, especially when it concerns this topic now, how do you prevent any form of mental illness? In other words, how do you nurture and protect your mental health?
Someone said something, and I think it's very valid. They said that the conversation of mental health is so important to be left to the professionals alone. And I think that is the way to go, right? We need to start having a lot of training, advocacy, education, basic first aid, mental health first aid for the general people, starting from our schools, starting from our secondary schools. For example, I've started teaching my son, my toddler, how to recognize emotions, and so we can start that way. We can start by educating people so that they understand what mental health is. And maybe that's what the Gen Zs have that all the other generations don't have, is that they are more in tune with their emotions, with their mental health, and they're able to cry out faster than most other generations would do. So we need to start from that point. Educate people. For a person who wants to take care of his mental health, it starts first with what you know. I keep on saying this, that the human brain doesn't work with reality. It works with perception. So if I don't know what is right, I'm likely going to miss it or misinterpret it, and that would even worsen my mental well-being. And so the important thing is, let's start by educating ourselves. Let's know what it is, and then let's be intentional about our mental well-being. The things that we do, the actions, the lifestyle modifications, let's be intentional about it. We might talk about some of these steps, if you permit, at some point.
Okay, before we get to the part where we discuss the things that can threaten your mental well-being, how you can identify it and take care of them, I like the fact that you mentioned Gen Z. Even though I was going to bring that at the end of the discussion, we can as well get into it now. So I'll read some things out verbatim according to what we've been talking about in the 7 o'clock hour. So they said that research shows Gen Z are comparatively more likely to seek mental health help compared to other generations. And that's why it was said that more of them seem to struggle more with their mental health more compared to the other generations. But there was something that was said by the association CEO of American Psychological Association. He said that while the mental health might be fair or poor of the Generation Z in comparison to others, it also means that they are probably more in tune to recognizing their issues compared to the older generation. Now, Ima from Lagos said something earlier about the older generation also were vulnerable. I mean, they went through these things, we saw them. But when you compare the coping mechanism, that's now the real issue. The coping mechanism of the current generation and the other generation, which was maybe what made it look like they were fine. What do you think? And do you think there is a better way to build mental resilience for the Generation Z? I hope you understand everything I say.
Oh, yes. So I agree that in terms of speaking up, the Gen Zs are more likely to speak up. I think of all the generations, the most balanced one is actually the millennials. They're quite balanced, in between the others and then Gen Zs. But Gen Zs are more likely going to speak up. I also think that the stressors or the pressure is more increased for the Gen Zs than you have for the other generation. Most of the stressors that the previous generation, the baby boomers and the likes, had were more of physical stressors, having to trek distance to go to school, having to work on the farm, we're more physical stressors. The Generation Z are actually fighting more of a psychological battle, right? You are, at home, so you're not expressing the physical stress, but you are exposed to a lot of things on social media, bullying on social media, seeing people advance their careers, whether it's fake or not, and it looks like you are not going anywhere. So it's more of the psychological battle that they deal with. And maybe that's why they're also crying out more. And I think they're also more assertive than the previous generation. The previous generations were taught how to, especially those who came out from the colonial rule, were taught how to take it in and keep quiet and say nothing. And they grew up that way. And you see that even in the way they perform that work. Work might be distressing, they will stay there. But the Generation Z are actually more assertive. They're more able to express themselves and say, no, this is affecting me. Of course, many people then see it as a problem. They go, why are you talking? Why you keep quiet, keep quiet, keep quiet? And they're not designed that way. They are not they're not groomed that way. So that's the difference that I see here. So yes, they're more able to speak up. So you see more of these cases with them. But I think it's a good thing. I was reading somewhere, one therapist was saying something about how almost all of them are talking about trauma, and how that's not true. And I disagreed. I disagreed because if you look at the definition of trauma simply means experiencing a distressing life event, right? And the question is, who determines what is a distressing life event? The person who is experiencing it. What is distressing to me might not be distressing to you. But the key thing here, and this is where I think people really should focus on, is making sure that the Gen Zs learn how to take responsibility of their own healing process or of their own flourishing. That is where we should focus on. We shouldn't be focusing on, oh, are they crying? Are they not shouting? Are they weak? No, they are not. It's simply that we need to teach them how to take responsibility so that when they identify this, they don't spend more time blaming people. They rather would go and say, okay, I have identified this. What can I do about this? And that's what I think they need. That's the edge that will change everything for the Gen Zs. I like that they are speaking up, but they need to take responsibility than they are doing.
So who will teach them to take responsibility? Now, I say this because in recent times, there have been people who say that mental health has become a buzzword that is now thrown around anyhow, especially by Gen Z. And again, I feel for them because any little thing, Gen Z, in terms of workplace irresponsibility, Gen Z, in terms of this Gen Z, I feel for them, but who will teach them to take this responsibility?
Well, that's what we're doing, all right? On the program this morning, we're creating that awareness. So in the workplace, for example, I think that many of the employers should focus on, rather than complaining about, oh, Gen Z, is to create training programs like this, get professionals to come in and teach them about their mental health. But if you really think about it, everybody has mental health. So why shouldn't everybody be talking about mental health? Right? Everybody has mental health. So if I have a mental health, what is wrong with me saying, oh, my mental health will be affected by doing this? Now, the previous generations also had their mental health affected. They just didn't say anything about it. They didn't say anything about it because they didn't even know what it was. So many of them built resilience to just handle it. But to be honest, when you think about the lives your parents lived, the kind of things they went through, I don't know about your own parents, but most of the parents that I interact with, and I see the struggles that they went through, I always think that maybe they bottled up things too much. Maybe. And if you hear some parents blame their kids for the struggles that they went through, they say, oh, it's because of you that I was in Nigeria. It's because of you that I did not do this. That's because instead of speaking up, they kept on smiling and suffering. And maybe that's why even Nigeria as a country is where it is today. So I don't think we should have a problem with people speaking up about their mental health. Rather, we should focus on investing in creating that awareness, investing in providing intervention. For example, in the workplace, you want to have free intervention, just like you have your HMOs or healthcare. You want to create interventions like that for the Gen Z. So when they cry, oh, my mental health, fine. There's an opportunity for you to talk to somebody who can help you understand things better and process what might be affecting your mental health, in that sense. And that way you're able to get the best out of them. So it's a lot of awareness, education, but we'll get there eventually. Now, the good thing is that many of them are already doing this themselves. Before now, if I look at the demography of the clientele, it was mostly women. Right now, when I look at that demography, I'm seeing more of the young people, the Gen Zs, so we have switched over time, and that's good. It's good because it means that they're doing something about it.
Interesting. I'll take this message from Musti and then come back to those things that can threaten your mental health. And then we'll also talk about what universal rights in terms of mental health means. Musti says the internet. That is one major issue. I give you an example. It is said that the porn the people consume today is what older generations could not consume in their lifetime. Thus, one adult today is seeing body images than all of their forefathers combined. How can the mind handle this? Also, the rush of information does not allow us be in the moment. We keep getting updates, 24-hour cycle and buzz. You feel left out. You compare your time to others. There is fear of missing out. So time is a different perception. It is difficult to preach patience or working on your own journey. During our own time, you waited for news to come, and it took 1 week before watching your season series, reading your magazines, etc. Patience was a practice. Also, other generations grew up quickly. For instance, the older generation saw wars during their lifetime and grew up quickly. Maturity was from 13 upwards. They lived with their older ones. The new generation lives in a bubble and take less from the old. We all need each other. Take the L's from the older generation and use it to build current situation. As they say, yesterday will always be better than today. Do you have anything to say to that?
So I agree totally. And I think that's why I talked about responsibility. Many people are blaming the Gen Zs and criticizing them rather than teaching them how to take responsibility. And I think that's the difference. Like you said, there's a lot of information. You can't be, and I have this with some of my young clients, you can't be exposing yourself to negative news, negative media almost 24/7. And you complain that you're having a low mood, or you complain that you're experiencing depression. Why? Because the brain works more with the information it gets. It produces neurotransmitters based on the information it gets. So the more you're listening to all these negative things, you're seeing all these things, the brain keeps on producing and flooding you with these chemicals that will eventually affect your mood. But the challenge is that they keep on exposing themselves and they expect that a miracle should happen. But if they were able to take responsibility and say, you know what, I'm going to watch or manage my time, manage what I'm exposed to, which is what the previous generation had. Of course, please note that they didn't do it intentionally. It was done for them because they didn't have what we have now. So what we have is a generation that has been flooded with this. And maybe I wouldn't blame the older generation so much because they didn't even know how to handle it, right? So the Gen Zs now were flooded with the information, internet and all that. And they have to do two things. They have to struggle to learn how to regulate these things on their own. And they also have to learn how to, distill the criticism that they are getting from their older generation, when all of us should be working together and saying, hey, how can we guide you to manage these things? But it's not all bad, because if you also see that the Gen Zs are they are more innovative, they are more creative. In fact, they seem to be coming up with newer techniques, newer innovation than the previous generation. That's also because of the exposure to information. So it's making sure that we're able to guide them to balance this exposure that they're getting. So I'm predicting that the future generations, maybe not the alpha generation, but the generation after the alpha, if we are all here by then, are more going to be able to create that balance, because they will learn from the Gen Zs and then are able to apply that balance to themselves.
Indeed. Thank you very much for sharing that. I recently took a break from social media. In fact, I'm still on that break from social media. And I can tell you that fear of missing out is not real. And this is what I mean. There are times you feel, oh, if I don't update myself with this, I will miss out this, or I will not do this, I will not get this. It's a lie. You will be perfectly fine if you are off social media the world will not crash and burn. And so the responsibility is more on you. You know, somebody once said that each generation comes with its own devil. And so this generation do have their own devils. Now, the responsibility is, well, on them as well as their parents and people around them to help them, guide them towards defeating and put their own devil, for the lack of a better word. And then they also need to accept that, because that's another side of it. I mean, it's one part for you to be led, to be mentored, for you to be processed, to say, hey, you should not do this. And it's another for you to see, okay, maybe I'll trust you and know that I might not understand what you're saying, but I will believe you and not expose myself to this thing you said I should not expose myself to. So really it takes a concerted effort. Go ahead.
Let me say something about that. And I think it's a general human nature. You can't want to guide me and start first by criticizing me. I am going to become defensive. It's normal. I don't start by saying, oh, I want you to improve this. You're not good enough. Why are you doing this? It's normal. I will become defensive. So what if we change our language? We change the way we approach them, right? And that's what therapy does for them. That's why you see that most of them are going to therapy. It's because when they get to therapy, the therapist doesn't start by criticizing them and telling them, oh, you're terrible, you're that. The therapist is trying to do the same thing their parents, we're trying to help them do, which is help them take responsibility. But it's your presentation that matters. Start first with recognizing the efforts they are putting in. It's not easy to be born in this generation. Start first by recognizing that effort. Then move on to presenting what you think they should be doing. And then eventually end with some bit of hope, telling them how you believe that the efforts they will put in will give them the desired result. It is that is what we get them taking responsibility.
Now, still on that, just the final one. What is your take on tough love?
Tough love. Yeah. I think it depends on the circumstance, right? In my experience, even as a therapist, there are some clients that I've seen, and I realized that was what would get them to take responsibility or to, start the process, right? So it depends on the personality of the person. It depends on the circumstance as well. But I think that a general trick is what I call the sandwich approach. Start first with kindness, go tough in between, and then, of course, end with kindness and hope. Because whether it's somebody who doesn't appreciate kindness or anything, at least you still get to the tough part of it. But you would have softened them up to be able to listen to you. So tough love depends on the circumstance and depends on the personality of the individual. But I think the sandwich approach works better in most cases.
All right. Thank you. Austin from Satellite says, I agree with the guest totally. The older generation suffer a lot physically. Can you imagine how far they always trek to go see their relations living far away? But this generation is using mobile phone to communicate easily without leaving their homes. Thank you, Austin. And now let's talk about the mental health right as an individual. What does it involve, and what are the things that can threaten your mental health rights?
So the mental health right is not different from the health, the right to health, right? It's that we're saying that health is not just physical health. Health is, mental health as well as social health, and everybody has a right to this basic, need, which is health. Everybody has a right to it. It's a universal right, regardless of your class, regardless of your country, regardless of your color, regardless of your cultural background, regardless of your generation. You have a right to complete health, and mental health is not exempted, right? So basically, the campaign this year is to create that awareness first so that people understand that everybody has a right to it. And this is even in line with what we've been talking about, which is that we need to come to accept that the Gen Zs have a right to mental health. So we should stop trying to shut them up to say, oh, stop talking about mental health. No, they should go ahead to talk about it because it's their basic human rights. But we need to also go beyond just talking about it to create interventions that people can have access to. So that includes investment in our primary healthcare system, such that primary health system is not just focused on physical health, but is also focused on mental health. So I can walk into my primary health center and have access to mental health support. maybe a professional therapist, or maybe somebody who has been trained to deliver some bit of first aid. I think Lagos State, is doing something like that, or did something like that a few weeks ago. I was part of a training in Lagos State where we trained primary healthcare practitioners, nurses, and doctors to be able to deliver some bit of first aid or recognize mental health needs and provide that support. And that's a good step. I wish all the other states can take that step as well. But basically, that's what it's saying. Everybody has a right to this, and we should create opportunities that for people to be able to have access to this fundamental human right. Because if you have a mind, you have a mental health, and you need care for your mind. So except you're saying to me that there are some people who don't have a mind, and who don't have brains. Okay, maybe if that's the case, then we can say those people are exempted. But if everybody has a brain, everybody has a mind, and everybody needs mental health care as well.
Thank you. This conversation reminds me of blood pressure and high blood pressure. How people erroneously say, I have blood pressure. No, instead of when they want to say high blood pressure, that you have a blood pressure means you can either have high blood pressure or low blood pressure. But that you have blood pressure means you have to take care of it. You have blood, right? You have veins, you have a heart. So you need to take care of it. And yes. All right, now on the final note, those same steps that you can take to protect your mental health, nurture it, and identify the things that might threaten it as well.
Okay, thank you. So I think the first thing for me is educating yourself, right? Educating yourself about mental health, not just what you see on social media. People are saying anything on social media. Recently, I found out that some people are putting up TikTok videos about their mental health struggle, and they're making money from it. And I said to someone, you can't be making money from being mentally ill and expect that this person would try to get well, because the money they are making from it is reinforcing the illness, right? So people need to educate themselves. And so if you're somebody who's watching that kind of a person, you think that's a normal way to live life. But you are not making money, they are making money from it. So understand that there are a lot of information out there, but you need to educate yourself with the right information. Now, when you do that, the second thing for me, and I always say this, is for you to learn how to focus on the things that are working in your life. Your brain is designed to focus on the negative. You would be the one to train it or retrain it to focus on the positives or the things that are happening good in your life, which is what I think the previous generations had, is that they'll just find themselves to console themselves, somehow. So we need to learn to do that, because it also helps in producing pleasant chemicals. Social interaction is also very important. We need to, go away from, social media from time to time and interact with real people, either calling people or just going to people, seeing people. That's very important. Positive connection is an important way of protecting your mental well-being. And then also engaging in activities that promote your well-being. Activities like learning a skill, activities like you talked about, detox, digital detox. We did something like that those days. Even though we didn't have access to WhatsApp, we just off our phone for a week or 2 weeks. So things like that, they went a long way to protecting us. So digital detox, deliberately celebrating yourself, regardless of how much you have achieved or how much you think you are short, because celebrating yourself actually gives you the energy and the psychological strength to keep on going. So like the lizard who jumps from the tree and nods his head and say, you know what, if you don't praise me, I'm praising myself. We need to learn to do that, because not everybody will do that for us. So you need to learn to be your own cheerleader. So that's where self-love comes in, prioritizing yourself, because you can't love others if you don't first love yourself. And so doing things that promote that well-being, learning a skill, going to the massage, keeping a portion of your salary to spoil yourself, right? Those things are very important in helping you, but most importantly, taking responsibility of your well-being. In life, you can't depend on everybody to help you get what you want. You need to take responsibility. The secret behind those who are able to make meaning out of their life and those who are not able to make meaning out of their life is that the first ones decided to take responsibility. So no matter what the country throws at you, no matter what life throws at you, take responsibility. Don't blame yourself, because that's a totally different thing. Take responsibility, ask for help. Many people are concerned about what people would say if they ask for help, but the truth is, everyone is struggling in one way or the other. And you might be shocked that nobody's saying anything. Nobody's criticizing you. In fact, people are happy or willing to help if only you ask. So let's learn to ask for help. The good book says that ask and you shall receive. So if you think that you're struggling, please ask for help. Ask for help. Professional help, friends, family members, ask for help. That could just make the difference. You might not get that help from everybody, but by asking, you would eventually find somebody who's able to point you to the right direction. And maybe that's where what would change the whole story, right? But being intentional and taking responsibility is the way to go.
Thank you so much for that exhaustive list. And we look forward to another conversation with you. Thank you for being there and always coming through for us. We appreciate the conversations.
Thank you for
having
having me.
Yeah. On social media, you are again at Chris Abojei, right?
Yes, Chris Abojei, at Chris Abojei, ChrisAbojei.
Good. Instagram, Twitter.
Instagram and Twitter, the same my handle.
All right. So if you're looking for him across all social media platforms, he is Chris Abojei. And thank you again for listening to the show. We continue next week. But now we'll take a short break. And when we come back, it will be with the children who would like to spell from 8:40 till 9:10. And the number to dial if you want to call in is 014489981. I know network can be a little bit iffy, so if I were you, I will start trying it now so that when we come back, we just have to take your calls. Now, to everyone who is going through one thing or the other, and maybe when people ask you, the easy and default answer to how are you is, I'm fine. I am playing the special dedication to you from Johnny Drill and Don Jazzy. How are you, my friend? Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
So some other time again.
Yep.
I'm sure your toddler is going to wonder, wow, I came into the house of a therapist